Hello and welcome. You're listening to Right Side of the Road. It's important for everyone to understand politics and to stay up to date, yes, even when you're young. Join me every week as we explore the facts and the news in a way even a 12-year-old can and should understand it. So as many of you probably remember, when COVID hit in March of 2020, schools had varying responses. Most resorted to online learning, some just shut down entirely. When they tried to open back up, they took different measures to try to slow the spread of the virus. Today we'll look at the reasoning for and against these measures, as well as the things schools are still doing as if it was 2020. But first, I want to cover a little bit of a background on transmission and death rates among kids as opposed to adults. So, 10 to 20 kids have died without pre-existing conditions because it's more common to die if you have conditions like asthma and bioimmune disorders before you get COVID. And the percentage rate of total COVID deaths among every person who've had it, even with asthma and things, it's less than 0.0001% of the total U.S. population of kids under 18. So that, 4 zeros and a 1, that's very small. That's the percent of entire population of 18 compared to how many people actually died from COVID. It is a very small chance. Now, to put that into perspective, a non-vaccinated kid, 12 or under, is safer than a fully vaccinated adult. And speaking of adults, on average, people over 18 had a 14% death rate compared to how many cases they had, with the percent increasing the older the age group. So if you were 80, you had a higher risk of dying from COVID than if you were 35. Transmission rates among kids are lower than adults as well. So many schools' first thought was to mandate masks among the students and faculty because masks were kind of thought of as magical things that prevent all transmission, because if you talk like this with something over your face, then apparently you can't transmit COVID. But it has been proven that cloth and paper masks, so just cloth masks you buy at Target, the Cat and Jack ones, or paper masks like surgical ones that they'll just hand out, they only stop about 10% of the droplets from your mouth, and droplets being the thing that transmit COVID when released from your mouth. So, many states have banned mask mandates in schools, meaning it is illegal in that state to require kids to wear masks, but some schools are still mandating masks despite state orders. Most of this, I believe, is purely political. The schools are kind of listening to Biden try to instill the fear of COVID in everyone. The left's agenda with the fear of COVID requires a whole separate episode, and I will certainly get to it later, but here's one of the many times the president has pushed masks.
As we work toward a safe and effective vaccine, we know the single most effective thing we can do to stop the spread of COVID is wear a mask. The head of the CDC warned this fall that for the foreseeable future, a mask remains the most potent weapon against the virus.
So like I said, kids have the lowest transmission rates of COVID among every different U.S. age group, and the lowest hospitalization and death rates when they do get the virus. In my opinion, at least, there are no scientific reasons for masking elementary and middle school students. Again, you're entitled to your own opinion, just make sure you have information before you make it. So, this affects children our age in just a couple different ways. Many people are forced into masks they don't want or need to wear. Some people are resisting these mandates. I mean, props to them, but they're being suspended. A girl in Florida was suspended more than 30 times for resisting the masks. But there's a deeper, almost psychological effect, I believe, because without being politically aware of this stuff, most kids just blindly accept what we've been told about masks. I know that's what everyone did last year. Don't blame you. But everyone should do their own research and learn the actual information. So subscribe and leave a 5-star review to help everyone find the right information. I know that was a flawless transition. And there are a couple things we can do. Inform your friends, for one. Make sure everyone you know knows the truth and not just the open lies people have been feeding us. You can do this by telling them by word of mouth, for one. Small conversation, tell them. Or you can share this podcast. It's a little bit easier than talking. And while you're at it, like, subscribe wherever you listen, and don't forget to leave a 5-star review. So, if you do want to go by the word of mouth thing, Geo.tv has a great article about the facts that masks really only have 10% effectiveness in stopping the spread of COVID. So if you want to actually give them scientific information, Geo.tv is where you want to find it. Overall, in this stage of COVID, the most we can do is keep everyone informed with the truth. Again, tell your friends, share this podcast, don't let the lies get to them. In addition to masks, some schools have started mandating the COVID vaccine, even among the students. And before I move on, I'm being very careful what I say here because YouTube is a little stingy on the topic of the COVID vaccine. But we'll actually probably get to that in a future episode. Anyway, like I said, in addition to masks, some schools have started mandating COVID vaccines. This isn't anything hugely new, mandating vaccines. Many schools have mandates for vaccines, like for things like polio. I've gotten letters countless times that I need to be caught up on my immunizations for diseases that I haven't even heard of. They're just like letters and numbers strung together. But right now, it's a little bit different. A few months back, a university in Arizona actually did try to do this before the trend caught on, and that was shut down very fast by the governor, Doug Ducey. But speaking of governors and vaccines, however, Governor Newsom of California is taking a very different approach. He mandated a few months ago that every student in both public and private schools in the state of California eligible for the vaccine must get it or be homeschooled. So, here's Governor Newsom making that announcement.
That's what we are announcing here today, a statewide requirement for in-person instruction for all of our children to add to a well-established list that currently includes 10 vaccinations and well-established rules and regulations that have been advanced by the legislature for decades.
Again, just like the masks, I think that all these schools that are doing this are listening to the Biden administration a little bit too much. Here's one of the times that Biden pushed the vaccine.
So please get vaccinated now. It works. It's free. It's never been easier. And it's never been more important. Do it now. For yourself and the people you care about. For your neighborhood. For your country. It sounds corny, but it's a patriotic thing to do.
Now, I believe this is a bad plan for California. In fact, right after Governor Newsom made this announcement, LA School District saw a pretty significant drop in their enrollment. This will most likely set a precedent for other states, especially big blue ones like maybe New Mexico, to follow suit, though. The mandate did not go into effect until the FDA gave full approval for the COVID vaccine for kids ages 12 to 15, but it got approval a few weeks ago, so theoretically kids are now living under this mandate. I don't know exactly what the situation is like in California. Now, I believe it'll most likely face lawsuits, but Democrats may be able to find a way around it, the ones that pushed it probably. They'll probably keep it in public schools, but private schools are generally exempt from these things, so they probably will not have it. If the mandate passes all lawsuits, however, it'll most likely be extended to kids 5 and up eventually, as the Pfizer vaccine has now been given emergency clearance for kids 5 to 11 now as well. And this affects us depending on the long-term effects of the vaccine. The COVID vaccine does not have the same decades of research as vaccines for viruses like the flu or measles. We don't know if it has long-term effects or not, and that's the problem right now. We've already seen cases of heart disease and heart failure, like myocarditis, as possible side effects of the vaccine, especially among young men. Personally, I believe we should wait and see, just to see what the side effects are long-term before we get it. Now, if you're vaccinated and you've done fine, good for you. You're entitled to your own opinion. I just want to make sure you're informed before you make your opinion, or you get the information and you change it. It is my personal opinion that we should be a little bit more hesitant when vaccinating younger people, roughly 18 and younger, because it's a different risk assessment with adults. They have a higher risk of COVID and a lower risk of the vaccine, while kids have a lower risk of COVID and a higher risk from the vaccine. Now, there are a few things we can do, and before I say this, I'm not a crazy anti-vaxxer. I'm anti-mandate. I don't think we should be mandating these things, and I'm anti-vaccine among very young kids. So, anyone, like I said, 18 or younger, you really don't need it. I don't think so. If that is your risk assessment and you think you do need it, go ahead, feel free. It's your opinion, but anyway, if we don't need it, it's difficult to spread word against this because the social media is crazy right now. They're censoring everything against vaccines, masks. It becomes difficult to get this through by electronic word of mouth. Still, always keep your friends informed. Share this episode of the podcast again. Now, you don't need to tell your friends not to get the vaccine. Please don't. Just be sure to inform them about the possible risks. Well, that concludes today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Right Side of the Road is a weekly podcast uploaded every Friday. Be sure to subscribe wherever you are listening and leave a 5-star review. Also, you can find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and many other popular podcast platforms. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next week.